Today, I want to talk about mediocre games. You know, the kind of JRPG where if you only look at the review scores, nobody really cared. A 6, maybe a 7, it's fine, it did its job. Nothing anyone's putting on a best games of all time list. But then you actually sit down and play it, and there's this one thing that catches you off guard. Maybe it's the story, maybe it's a character, or maybe it's just the overall vibe. Whatever it is, the game grabs you in a way you really weren't expecting. And just to be clear, I'm not here to sell you a list of hidden masterpieces. These games are mediocre, they have flaws, and I'm gonna tell you about every one of them. But each game on this list has at least one quality that works well enough to make it worth your time. I picked 10 that I genuinely think deserve a chance. So let's get into it. First up, Death End Request from Compile Heart. From a distance, this looks like just another anime RPG with cute girls. But once you actually start playing it, it gets way more interesting than you would expect. The premise is great. You play as a programmer who gets trapped inside a VR MMO she helped create. Except the game is broken, full of bugs, and it has basically turned into a real death trap. Meanwhile, outside the game, one of her old colleagues is trying to help her escape. And it mixes visual novel sections with turn-based combat, so yeah, there's a lot of reading, a lot of story, and a whole pile of bad endings waiting for you to make the wrong choice. For me, the combat is probably the most fun part. You move your characters around the battlefield and literally launch enemies back and forth, bouncing them between your party like a pinball. There's also a corruption mechanic that makes your character stronger, but if you push it too far, they can turn into a bug in the middle of a fight. It's definitely not a polished game. The pacing slows down in places, and it can get pretty repetitive. But the weird combat and the story ended up winning me over. I'd recommend it if you like denser RPGs and don't mind doing a lot of reading. And honestly, it's almost always on sale. Number 2, Am Setsuna from Tokyo RPG Factory. This one's a classic case of a game that lives on atmosphere. It's heavily inspired by Chrono Trigger and that older style of RPG. Turn-based combat with a timing bar plus a momentum system where you press the button at the right moment to add an extra effect to your attacks. The combat works, but it's nothing groundbreaking, and after a while it gets a little old. What got me here is the mood. It's artsy and minimalist, from the menus to the world itself, which is buried in snow from start to finish, with this piano soundtrack playing over all of it. Am Setsuna tells a really melancholy story. You follow Setsuna, a girl chosen to be sacrificed to keep the world at peace, and you're basically the mercenary escorting her to the end of that pilgrimage. Some people find it monotonous, and I kind of get it. It's snow the whole time and the combat repeats. But if you get into the right headspace, on a quieter day, this game has a really nice feel to it. And it's short too. Not perfect, but definitely not bad either. Number 3, Blue Reflection from Gust, released in 2017. And this is one I like quite a bit. I'd recommend it to anyone who enjoys JRPGs that focus more on the characters and their relationships, because that's really what the whole game is built around. It has that magical girl school life atmosphere. There's a lot of talking, a lot of time spent getting to know the girls, and their relationships are basically the main attraction. A lot of people compare it to Persona, but honestly, I think Blue Reflection has enough of its own identity. I've never really bought the whole Persona clone label people throw at it. It felt different from most things I played, mostly because the actual RPG side almost feels secondary. Now, some of the dialogue isn't very well written, some of it is honestly pretty dull, and the side quests definitely get repetitive. But it's not a very long game. I finished it in around 26 hours. And visually, it's excellent. The artwork looks great, the animations are really polished, and the character designs are exactly what you would expect from Gust. They have that clean, polished look the studio usually gets right. The dungeons, though, are repetitive, and the combat is very easy. So don't come into this expecting much of a challenge. And honestly, when I first started playing, I thought the story was kind of silly. But the longer I played, the more it started to win me over. One thing you should know is that the second game fixes just about every problem the first one has. It's a much better game to actually play. But even with all its flaws, the original is still worth experiencing, mostly because of the bond between the girls. That's really the heart of the game. Number 4, Lost Dimension. It's a JRPG with some strategy elements, and the way combat works reminds me a lot of Parasite Eve on the PS1. You can move around the battlefield, get into position, and then attack. The music's good, the graphics have that nice anime look, and there's a little bit of Persona in there too. So right away, I'd recommend it if you like Persona and turn-based RPGs that give you some freedom of movement during combat. What really makes Lost Dimension stand out though is one clever idea. You're climbing a tower with a group of characters, except some of them are traitors. And on every floor, you have to figure out who the traitor is and get rid of them. The traitors change each time you play, so there's actually some replay value there. And look, this game is good precisely because it's mediocre. It's not trying to be some modern classic. It doesn't have a brilliant story or some unforgettable cast of characters. It's kind of generic anime, honestly, but that's also part of the charm. It knows what it is, it does its job well, and I had a great time with it. Sometimes that's really all you want from a game.
Of adventure and new encounters, and eventually, the very
Number 5, Harvestella. This is basically Square's attempt at mixing a farming game with an action RPG. Something along the lines of Rune Factory or that whole idea of blending Stardew Valley with Final Fantasy. In practice, you spend your days planting crops, fishing, cooking, and talking to the people in town. Then you head into dungeons and fight using an action combat system where you can switch jobs on the fly. Warrior, mage, and a bunch of others. There's a lot of stuff packed into this game. And that's also where the problem starts. Harvestella tries to do a lot, but it doesn't really do any one thing exceptionally well. The farming is much shallower than it would be in a game built entirely around farming, and the pacing between taking care of the farm and actually progressing through the RPG side can feel pretty awkward. Honestly, I think this would have worked better as either a turn-based RPG or a straight dungeon crawler, because the actual farming part is easily the weakest thing here. But what kept me playing was the story. There's a 5th season in this world called Quietus. It's basically a season of death. The crops die and nobody's allowed to leave their home. And the mystery behind it is way more interesting than I expected from a farming game. The world is beautiful and it has that familiar Final Fantasy charm. And by the end, I was much more attached to the game than I thought I'd be. Number 6, Radiata Stories. This is one of those games that got pretty average reviews back then. Nothing about it really stood out. But over time, it became a cult favorite that fans will defend to the death. And yeah, I'm one of them. What really makes this game work is the world. The city of Radiata feels alive in a way that was pretty rare at the time. There are around 300 people living there, and you can recruit about 175 of them into your party. But the coolest part is that every character has their own daily routine. They work, they sleep, and they move around town on a set schedule. So you can pick some completely random guy and follow him around all day just to see what he does. It reminds me a little of Shenmue in that way. Radiata is still one of the liveliest, prettiest, and most fun cities I've ever explored in a JRPG. The city and the people living in it are really the heart of Radiata Stories. I also think the game still looks great. Honestly, it has aged really well. The gameplay is fun, and it's satisfying to mess around with different character combinations. And I really like the lighter, more comedic tone of the story. There's no unforgettable narrative here, and the combat isn't groundbreaking, but it does the basics really well. The review scores might be mediocre, but this is still one of the games I'm most fond of.
Head to Canaan.
Why do you want to go to Canaan?
It's a place full of magic, and it can grant any wish that you make.
Number 7. Tales of Xillia 2 from Bandai Namco. This one's a bit divisive among fans. Plenty of people hate it, but I've got a real soft spot for it. The game reuses a lot from Xillia 1. The same maps, the same places, so you constantly get that feeling that you've already seen everything before. Xillia 2 feels like a sequel in name only. It comes across more like a spin-off of the first game. And then there's the infamous debt system, where your character starts the game owing a fortune, and you have to keep paying it off before the story can move forward. A lot of people hate that, and I completely get it, because I hated it too. It absolutely kills the pacing of the plot. But the story in this game is heavier and more mature than what you usually get from Tales. You play as Ludger, who doesn't have a voice. He's the silent protagonist type, and the game gives you dialogue choices that can lead to different endings. The story deals with parallel dimensions and the brutal decision of having to destroy entire worlds, and it hit me in a way I really wasn't prepared for. The ending stayed with me. It's one of those stories that manages to surprise you right at the end. So even with all the flaws, it was worth every hour for me.
Do as we say.
I will sign the contract.
Number 8. Crystar. This game has one of the saddest, but also one of the most beautiful ideas I've seen in a JRPG. The main character gets dragged into purgatory, and right at the beginning, she ends up killing her own sister. So she makes a pact to try to bring her back. And the interesting part is that in this game, crying actually becomes a source of power. It's her pain and grief that give her the strength to keep fighting. I thought that was a beautiful idea because the whole game is really about grief and loss. The story also uses a structure similar to Dragon Card. After you finish the game, time rewinds and the story automatically pushes you into Chapter 6. The story is strong, and the personalities of the heroines carry a lot of the game. The gameplay, though, could have been much better. The biggest problems are the slow battles and the lack of enemy variety. Even the bosses sometimes feel like regular enemies with way more health than they need, so fights can turn into a bit of a slog. Combat is mostly that just keep swinging style, and after a while, it gets repetitive. The dungeons are also pretty basic, and you can definitely tell this was a smaller budget game. So, if you're only here for the gameplay, you'll probably find it mediocre. The soundtrack is pretty good though. I liked it quite a bit. I'd recommend Crystar if you don't mind simpler combat and just want an emotional story that's easy to follow. Number 9. The Alliance Alive. This one's a little different from your typical JRPG, because it takes a lot of inspiration from the Saga series. You don't just grind enemies, earn XP, and level up the usual way. Instead, your characters can randomly learn new abilities during battle, sometimes right at the end of a combat round. Exploring the world is easily one of the best parts of the game. The map is full of little secrets, hidden areas, and things that actually reward you for going off the main path. But the thing that really stood out to me was the guild system. As you explore, you can build towers around the map and assign different guilds to them. And depending on which guild you choose, you'll get different kinds of support and bonuses during battle. It's a pretty simple idea, but it gives exploration a real purpose beyond just finding more treasure. That said, the game definitely has a few problems. For one thing, there's no voice acting at all. And I mean none. They didn't even add the usual little grunts or battle shouts. The dungeons are also pretty basic. But honestly, the biggest problem for me was a quest log. The game is terrible at reminding you what you were doing. You can stop playing for a few days, come back, and have absolutely no idea where you're supposed to go. And once that happens, the pacing takes a serious hit. There are also a lot of playable characters, probably too many. You get so many people to choose from that most of them end up sitting on the bench while you stick with the same small group for most of the game. Even with all of that though, I still had a lot of fun with it. The guild system, the exploration, and the lighter fantasy story all come together really well. It has that charming 90s JRPG feeling, even though it came out much later. It's definitely flawed, but it has a lot of personality. And I still think it's worth playing, warts and all. And to close things out, number 10, Reynatis, released in 2024. It's the newest game on the list, and there are some pretty notable names behind it. People who previously worked on Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, both on the writing side and the music. Reynatis is a pretty interesting action RPG. You can tell the budget wasn't huge, but at the same time, you can tell the developers genuinely cared about what they were making. And that really comes through while you're playing. I barely ran into any technical issues. The graphics though, yeah, they might put some people off. Visually, it's definitely not the game's strongest point. The characters, the story, and especially the setting are where it becomes much more interesting. It takes place in modern-day Shibuya, except magic is real, and it's illegal. Wizards are forced to live in hiding while a government agency hunts them down. And the story follows two protagonists on opposite sides of that conflict, a wizard who wants freedom and an officer who wants to keep magic under control. The combat is fast and stylish. It reminded me a little of the newer Ys games, where you're constantly chaining attacks together and keeping the action moving. The cutscenes are pretty dated though. And the story feels a little rushed in places, like it needed a few more hours to properly develop some of its ideas. The combat is fun, but it does start to feel repetitive after a while. The soundtrack is fantastic though, and by the end, I had a really good time with the game. I definitely recommend picking it up on sale. At full AAA price though, nah, I don't think it's worth that. And that's the list. Those were the 10. 10 JRPGs that, judging by the review scores, most people probably wouldn't call great. Some people wouldn't even call them good. And yeah, they're flawed. Some of them are repetitive, some are awkward, and some clearly needed a bigger budget. But every one of them has something that worked for me. Maybe it was the story, a character, an interesting idea, or just the overall vibe. Something that made me care about the game a lot more than a Metacritic score or an IGN review would suggest. A lot of people only buy games with high review scores, and honestly, I think they end up missing some really interesting experiences because of that. And that's really the point I wanted to make with this video. A game doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be a masterpiece to leave an impression on you. Sometimes it's that random, mediocre RPG that just speaks your language. It stays in your head, and years later, you're still defending it whenever someone brings it up. But now, I want to hear from you. What's that one mediocre game that, for whatever reason, became a personal obsession of yours? Leave it in the comments, because I genuinely want to read your answers. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.